All right, so guys, we'll start with the show. We get straight on it, and we'll leave time at the end for questions and time for Kevin to teach us. Um, let's um, let's get straight into it. Um, Brendan said to me that he had a particular question. Brendan, what was the question?
Oh, well, yeah, I thought something was quite interesting that the singular witness each at a window, but they're not able to see each other. So for me, it's kind of like it falls in the same realm, even though there are two witnesses. But it's sort of anyone can say they stood there, but they haven't stood there. So in my opinion, it wouldn't count. That's just another viewpoint of it.
Yeah, well, you into a certain extent the agreement of the Chumash, because the Chumash is saying to a certain degree that when there are two witnesses that can corroborate having viewed each other, then that is much more substantiated as to the fact that they actually witnessed the event. Because otherwise, one person could have been talking to another individual in a bar and say, listen, we both owe money to this gangster, and let's get together and say we viewed a crime. So the thing of it is, if they were witnessed by others at that location, and they're having witnessed each other, then it obviously does add to the veracity of their claims. So it's a good point. So let's just quickly get into it. I hope that answers your question, Brendan. It's valid. Okay.
Mm, thanks.
So, so the Gemara brought this issue just in summary that Rav Zutra Bar Tova said in the name of Rav that, how do we know that isolated witnesses can't join together to form two witnesses? And we said quite clearly that in Devarim, chapter 17, verse 16, it said, by the testimony of two witnesses or three witnesses, the one who deserves to die shall be executed. So, as Gavin pointed out yesterday, a minimum of two witnesses are needed. So, why do you need the superfluous word he shall witnesses. In other words, you could say by the testimony of two or three witnesses. So we learnt in 5a that it mentions the word witnesses twice to show that if any of the witnesses are invalidated because they've got conflicting testimony, the Adim Zomimim, or alternatively, they have a biases because they are related to the defendant um, or the plaintiff or other witnesses, they seem to have a prejudice either for and against, or if they a sinner, we can't trust their testimony, or if they're a professional gambler, because we can't trust their objectivity that they don't have odds on who wins, or that they don't owe money to the person that's about to get the death penalty. So that's why the word witnesses is needed in plurality. And then the further point that Gavin and I mentioned yesterday is the pasuk in saying he shall not be executed by the testimony of one witness. But we just said that you need the testimony of at least two witnesses. So we're saying that we learn that term one witness to establish that if witnesses can corroborate to having seen the crime individually, they're not joined together unless they're able to see each other. We did say, though, that we learned in a brisa that if either the one issuing the warning saw one of the witnesses individually, but the witnesses for some reason were in different apartments in a Manhattan building, but they couldn't see each other, but the person issuing the warning could see each of the witnesses, that would serve to obviously combine them. Also, if they made their testimony within the utterance of a phrase, peace be upon you, my master, my teacher, where the one's testimony ended where the other one began, we can join witnesses. But we generally don't join witnesses in a capital case. Why? Because in a capital case, it says, by the testimony of two witnesses or three witnesses, the one who deserves to die shall be executed. So we learn from there's a stringency when it comes to execution that we don't want to start joining witnesses and convicting somebody, and we're going to look at everything in their favor to make sure that it doesn't occur. And this was the point that Rav Nachman basically brought, and Rav Zutra brought, because Rav Nachman said, look, we learn that the testimony of isolated witnesses is effective in a monetary case. How do we know this? Because it said shall be executed. Um, it doesn't use that phrase at the end, that superfluous phrase, and say, and not by the testimony of one witness, which means if there are two witnesses in a monetary case, that would suffice, but they don't have to have seen each other. They can be joined by their testimonies sequentially. But when it comes to a case, a capital case, with Devarim chapter 17, verse 16, he shall not be executed by the testimony of one witness, which means it's a protective measure in a capital case that one witness cannot be joined to another. But he is holding, Rav Nachman, there's no issue in a monetary case if the one party didn't see the other. And Rav Zutra had a problem with that. What was the problem with it, guys? I'm testing you. Guys?
Yeah, um,
It's
just
oddly quiet.
yeah, I didn't actually hear you. I'll be honest. Do you want to repeat that, and then I can give it a
Yeah.
shot?
So, what was Rav Zutra's issue with Rav Nachman? Because Rav Nachman brought the point and said, look, it's only in a capital case because it said, by the testimony of one witness, he shall not be executed. That's in Devarim. So he said, you come to learn there that you cannot join two witnesses that are individuals that happen to see the crime but didn't see each other for the reason that Brendan mentioned, is that there's a lot at stake here. But for a monetary case, you can. So that conjoining of witnesses is only a stringency that applies in a capital case, but not in a monetary case. And what was Rav Zutra's issue with it yesterday? You don't have to remember the Rav, you just have to remember the argument, guys.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I heard you now, but I can't remember this.
Lars? Okay, Kevin?
I'm going to guess I'm maybe wrong. Maybe there should be consistency, not just with a capital case where you need two witnesses. Maybe it should also be with monetary issues, monetary matter. Maybe there should also be not just one. One's testimony is acceptable for monetary matter, whereas two are essential for a capital case. Maybe that's the argument.
So, Rav Zutra is basically, in a certain way, very grateful that there's that pasuk, because he's not looking for consistency, because he's of the view that it shouldn't be consistent. The sort of joining of witnesses that didn't see each other but witnessed a particular maybe car accident in terms of damages, or a loan that was taken but not paid back. He's saying then, in a monetary case, by all means, you can be more stringent. But what Rav Zutra is saying is, in a case of execution, only one witness at a time cannot join another and become two witnesses. His issue isn't with the pasuk, and it's not with consistency. He was saying when it comes to convicting a defendant of murder and executing him, he agrees with the pasuk not to join witnesses that haven't viewed each other. But he's saying that if it's a case where it could save, if it could save the defendant, they should be joined together. So where do we see a case like this? If it was established that there were a set of witnesses in the east and west wing, we'll just say one witness in the one wing and one witness in the other. He's all for joining them, especially if one is seen to be irrelevant and is discredited as a witness. Not because that his testimony is conspiring, but because he has a prejudice. And therefore, what it would do is it would discredit all the other witnesses as part of a singular group if they were joined, and therefore it would get the defendant off the hook. That's why this whole issue came up about testimony one after another. So he was saying, in a case where it could get a defendant executed, we agree you don't join one witness with another witness if they never viewed each other. But in a case where it could actually get the defendant off the hook by joining two witnesses, the one is invalidated, then it's a case that doesn't appear necessarily in a capital case. For simple reason is that if you're looking to exonerate, You don't join the witnesses. The fact that one standalone doesn't view the other, Rav Zutra's happy with it. He's talking in a case when there's a bigger group. That sometimes the viewing of the other witness, it's not the end of the world if they joined, because it will allow mercy in the defendant. So he's saying, why don't we apply a rule book that's not contradictory? Meaning when it's case of conviction, we apply all the stringencies to get the defendant off, such as this pasuk, but when it's a case of exoneration, let's join the group in order to get the defendant off also. All right, let me just move on. There was a point that we mentioned yesterday. Sorry, does anybody have a question? Apologies.
I've got one. So it's only this one rabbi's opinion that you can join two singular to save a life, or is it like a global viewpoint?
So the Gemara addresses it and says, listen, because it's saying, look, so Rav Zutra said that this is the case. Now, it doesn't mean the others disagree, because they said the Gemara ends up saying this is a difficulty. Now, when the Gemara uses this term kashia, it means a difficulty not insurmountable, because despite the difficulty, we go with Rav Nachman's ruling in Halacha. The Rambam mentions this in Eidos chapter 4, verse 2, in Choshen Mishpat. So the thing of it is, we still go with Rav Nachman here. We don't go with Rav Zutra. But logically, it is a difficulty because we say he's got a valid point. So even the Tanakama and the rabbinical opinion said there's a validity of point. But we cannot go on a leniency on the halacha. We're going to have to stick through consistency, like Kevin said. But we say that Rav Zutra is actually making a good point. But Kevin's right, that we have to go with the consistency at the end of the day. If it's basically for that you cannot do it to convict, you cannot do it to exonerate. It has to be a bit of a fair system both ways. But they say he's got a valid point, because we do try and get the person off. Now, there was one other point, and this is very important that we went through yesterday. Rav Papa said to Abaya, like, not only this, but he's saying, look, we know that if one witness didn't see the other witness, but they've both viewed the crime in its entirety, they do not combine to form a single set of witnesses, because they didn't witness the event simultaneously with the awareness of the other one. So that sounds logical enough, but then the Brisa uses this phrase, not only this. So it's introducing like a novelty. And what's that? So Rav Papa says to Abaya, now if you only had one person observing from this window and then one from the other window, right? In which case that both of them witnessed the entire act. And then it's not obvious that they can't testify and join. It's only because of the pasuk. Then when it says not only that, we're learning this thing that one witness saw half the act and the other witness saw half the act. And they didn't even see each other, but they saw half the act of the crime. Why would it even be necessary for the Tana to mention combining them? Because neither of them actually saw the entire crime being committed. So they're saying if the less obvious case is brought forward, that they witnessed the entire crime, each of them separately, they can't be joined. Why are you saying as if it's a novelty if they both viewed the crime, but the one viewed the first portion and the other witness viewed the second portion, they can't combine? I mean, it's obvious. Why even mention it? Guys, what was the answer given yesterday? I just want to see your retention, please, God, something.
That you can't combine it. You have to have seen the full thing. Otherwise it doesn't.
Yeah,
You
no,
can't be a witness.
Uh,
You can't be a witness unless you both seen the full.
No, but why, Gavin, what it's asking is that you and I are saying the obvious, but why would you even think that it could be something contradictory to that? That's what the Gemara is asking. In other,
Sorry, I
yeah,
probably, yeah. Okay, I got you, yeah.
you spot on with logic. It's just saying then, according to your logic, which is right, Gavin, why would you even have a question that you could view it partially and join them if you didn't think you could view it in full and join them? Lance, Kevin?
what was Gavin was saying about the acts that people have to, the witness, if it's a murder, they have to actually see the actual gruesomeness. They can't see part of it. They have to witness the whole act.
No. So what the Gemara is asking is, it's saying, listen, if you had to tell me the second part first, which means, listen, Shmuel only viewed the first part of the crime, and Ruvain only viewed the second part of the crime. And Shmuel did not see Ruvain as a witness, and Reuven did not see Shmuel. They cannot join to provide testimony against the accused. And then it says, and more so, if they each saw the act in its entirety, they can't be joined to form a single set of witnesses because they never viewed each other. Okay, now that is logical because you're taking something and saying, okay, if they couldn't testify because they only saw part of the crime and they weren't together, we understand. But if they viewed the crime from start to finish and they weren't together, that's a novelty to tell us that they can't join to form a single set of witnesses. But the Gemara is asking, exactly as Gavin said, the other way around seems illogical. Meaning, if the Gemara is starting off first and saying Shmuel saw the entire criminal act and Reuven saw the entire criminal act, it's just that Reuven and Shmuel never saw each other, so they can't join to form one set of witnesses, being two. And even more than that, if they only viewed part of the act, they can't join together. I mean, it's obvious. It's like if they can't do it when they saw the thing in entirety, why would you even think that if they saw it partially, that would count? Any
Well,
answers from yesterday,
in
Lawrence?
case they overlap, if they saw each
No, no,
other,
no,
but they
no, no.
never.
So we're saying in a case where, firstly, even if they do overlap, if there's a certain part that's missing, then you don't have a full witness to the entire act. You know,
Correct, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's why the Gemara is saying that is that if 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 they both viewed it but they didn't see each other, right? Then
yes.
then they're not counted as one as a single witness. So if they both saw half, but there was an overlap between the two of them, then maybe you would think that maybe because they did overlap, you could consider them as one single witness, and they're saying you can't.
I think it's
That's
a
my
great
argument.
point.
I mean, that's my point. I could be wrong. I'm obviously
No, no,
wrong,
I
but I'm
think
just
it's a great point. The Gemara didn't bring that up, but I think it's a great point. Is at that point of overlap, was it sufficient to see not the fight between the victim and the murderer, but the point of the knife insertion and not where it all scurried afterwards? I think that's a very valid point. The Gemara
The,
brings
the
up a
problem
separate point, but it's I
the
think
problem with that is that you have two holes making a hole, so you have one hole, but you need two witnesses, so it wouldn't help you.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Lance, repeat that again so I can hear what you're saying. Apologies.
If you have two halves making a whole, okay, one person saw half of it, other person saw the other half. The two of them make a whole. That's one whole. That's one witness. But you need two witnesses, so it doesn't help you.
Mm.
So logically, Lance is correct. So Gavin's got a point in what happens if they overlap. But Gavin, if they overlap at the critical point at which they saw a homicide, they didn't see it separately because the argument that led up to that and the point at which the fatal blow was cast, it didn't matter afterwards if it took 20 minutes to die. It's only the point of relevance in terms of A killing B. If they viewed that simultaneously, then they both saw the act simultaneously of the impact. So,
Yeah.
in other words, Gav, it wouldn't be. It's only that critical point where it would count. Otherwise, it wouldn't count. Exactly as Lance is saying. So the Gemara brings a different point, and that point is that when you're looking at an act of sexual immorality like adultery, the Gemara says you don't have to see the act in its entirety, according to a lot of opinions. In other words, Abaya said to Rav Papa now. The second ruling of the Brisa is not necessary except for the case of a person cohabiting with a forbidden woman, such as another man's wife, because to execute him for adultery is not necessary for the witness to observe the entire act, but merely to see enough to make it clear that they engaged in a conjugal act. Thus, two witnesses may each briefly observe a part of this forbidden act and yet testify about a full crime. So therefore, the brisa in the case of a murder has to let you know that even though it's a capital crime, they do not form the set of witnesses necessary to have him executed, since they did not witness the actual murder simultaneously. It's not like a act where you can see if a man is in between a woman. You can pretty much gather that they weren't playing Scrabble. Okay, so Rava says. So before we go to Rava, that's clear. So just let me give you a bit of an indication. There are 3 points with regards to sexual immorality. There's a very, very stringent opinion that we're going to be learning at the end of this chapter, which is almost upon us because we're flying through the material now, is that you have to see the equivalent of, think of it like an eyedropper tool or a nail polish, where the applicator is inserted in the bottle. So they did that to try and get people off adultery. So there are two opinions that hold by that, because they wanted to make sure nobody died in their watch. Okay? The general rabbinic opinion is nobody's going to be sitting there where a couple's intimate and say, hey, wait, we could get the death penalty for adultery, but it's not a problem, guys. See what I'm inserting into her. Just step right up, get your popcorn and your Coke. I just need enough for you to see so you can convict us and kill us all. So the rabbis are saying, listen, that's not going to happen. So if you're asking that sort of stringency, nobody's ever going to get killed for adultery. And that's what the two other rabbis are saying. They're saying that's the point. We don't want anybody to be killed for adultery. And others are saying it's not reasonable, because then why even have the law in to prevent adultery if you're never going to catch them out? Okay? Then there's the middle of the road opinion that says you have to view the whole conjugal act from start to finish, but you don't have to be close enough to basically be able to see that sort of intercourse right up close, because it's not going to happen that they will transgress if there's somebody holding out rate cards and eating popcorn and like having a camera there, sort of thing. So the general position is that one would have to see the full conjugal act, but you don't have to see the insertion to know that what they're doing. The other opinion, which is even more stringent than that, is you don't have to see the full act. You don't necessarily have to see how long intercourse went on for. If you see the beginning of the act and they've won the 6-hour freestyle Olympia championship for orgasm, it doesn't mean that you have to be there for the 6 hours. You see it, you see what's happened, and then somebody else sees what happened, and then they're at the point where it's round number 2. That's okay. They don't have to see the whole act necessarily. So that's the more stringent opinion. You can see the partial act as long as you can ascertain that it's a conjugal act of intercourse. Okay? Which is where we're holding now. So what Abaya was saying to Rav Papa is you need it in a case of adultery. Because in the case of adultery, you can, one witness, for example, you could end up saying it's quite a chidush, it's quite a novel idea, because one witness that sees part of an adultery act and the other witness that sees another part of the adultery act, you could end up saying that why don't you join them, because they don't have to view the act in entirety. And therefore you need that pasuk in Deuteronomy where it says any act that requires an execution, even though it's not murder but it's a capital case of adultery or sexual immorality, you cannot join the witnesses, because even though it's sufficed in that case to watch part of the conjugal act, it's not like a murder where, as Gavin said, the only point that it would be simultaneous is the interception of the perpetrator, the murderer Gavin, stabbing the victim. Other than that, there's nothing to testify about. The argument that led up to that's irrelevant. The ensuing groaning that happened afterwards when the victim dies is irrelevant. And at the point where they see that weapon against bodily contact, if that's simultaneous, that's the act of murder viewed anyway. Then they've seen the entire act. Do you get it? So he's saying,
No. No, I understand that, but I thought there would be a point in time where they overlap. Like the one saw the knife going in, but he stayed a bit longer, and the other guy saw the knife actually coming out from that point. The knife coming out, so the overlap is only for that split second type of thing. But listen, I'm obviously wrong, and
No, you're not
because
wrong, because Gavin's
them.
got one relevant point here. Is that, more people die not of a knife being put into them, but when the knife is pulled out, when the artery is cut and the person bleeds to
Mm.
death. So, what is the point at which is considered the fatal blow? Is it the insertion of the knife, or is it the removal where the person bleeds to death? Does it stab a vital organ, or is it the bleed out? So, Gavin, you have got a relevant point, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway, guys, so you get the hint of why it's mentioned, because it's not as obvious. So we're saying whenever you have this pasuk where somebody is going to be executed and it's not a murder, you can witness part of the act, and therefore it had to be stated as a novelty. Okay, let's quickly go
Can
on.
I ask you something? I
Yeah.
actually wanted to ask you on this yesterday. Sorry, it did come back to me when you brought it out. Just forgot about that issue completely. Uh, isn't adultery? I mean, isn't it basically going to be? It's going to land up being the death sentence as well. So why is it? It's not a monetary case. So why is it? Why is it treated differently? I mean, it's not a murder, but the person's going to be executed. So to me, they both what's it called? Capital cases. I don't understand why. I understand your point. You heard everything you said, but why aren't they treated the same? Why is it treated differently?
So in some ways they are treated the same, in some ways differently. So let me put it to you like this: is that they are treated the same because the pasuk saves both of them, Gavin. So in that way, you're absolutely right, they're treated the same. You shall not execute by the testimony of one witness, which proves even in an adultery case, you can't join witnesses that haven't seen each other to make two witnesses. Where it differs is if both the witnesses saw each other and they saw the forbidden act. Yeah, but they saw each other at a certain point. In other words, say the sexual act took an hour, and witness one was viewing it from his apartment because he figured this is better than DSTV or Netflix, and they kind of at a certain point, the guy left the hallway, walked over and saw the other one and said, "Hey, do you know what I've just seen? Hamshmirul across the road's busy banging the other guy's missus." In that particular case, he figured, okay, I've got nothing better to do. Let me go and watch it. And he viewed the second half. But because they could both make out that it's a conjugal act, if they happened to have not witnessed it together, then we say that they can't join as one set of witnesses. But say they saw each other, but they only saw 10 minutes. Like, okay, they're having a chat. Two oaks are having a smoke, and they're having a chat out their window. And then they see across the road in an apartment, their next door neighbor is banging the other one's missus. And they both view it, but they see each other. They're having a cigarette outside, but they only see some of the act. But this act carries on for an hour, and they saw 5 minutes of panting and breathing and whatever. And they thought, listen, I don't want my missus to come home and then there's drama or whatever. It's like just, all right, we've seen enough. That suffices. It also suffices if the one guy comes in, sees it, and says, "Oh my gosh, look what I'm looking at." They see each other. They see each other as witnesses, and the other guy says, "Listen, I don't have a meeting at this camp. Let me watch the rest." That's okay. Because watching part of the conjugal act is coming to you right now, Lance, is enough. And if you want to know why different rules apply, Gavin, is because with a murderer, it's a risk to the public. It's a risk to the public. So that's why even if that person gets off indirectly, because they've tied the person to the pier, waited for the tide to come in, or they didn't get warning. You don't have to get warning necessarily for adultery in the same way, because if a person's warned, they're not going to carry on with the act. So different laws do apply, but then they still get the barley treatment in the case of a murder. I'm not sure in the case of adultery. Lance wanted to ask something.
Yeah, you basically very briefly touched on the warning. I thought for capital punishment, they must have had a warning. Now, it doesn't help standing there looking there for half an hour. you've got to give them a warning. Otherwise, your testimony isn't valid because you haven't given them, they haven't been warned.
So
I thought
what
that there has to be a warning for capital case.
so what I need to do is I actually need to speak to Rav Simcha Steinhauer, because in Sota, um, in Sota it deals with this. I've got to actually see if a warning occurs across the board with idolatry, adultery, murder, and blasphemy. I actually need to find out. I need to find out, Lance. I don't know if it occurs across the board, because we're already learning a different rule here, that if you view part of a conjugal act according to certain opinions, it suffices. Um, and uh, we learn that that's not the case for the murder. It's not the same case. So maybe there's different rules of warning. According to other opinions, you have to view the whole act of adultery. So Lance, it's not the opinion of all. So what I want to do is try and get Rabbi Rankan or Rav Simcha Steinhauer and basically have a summary of which ones require warning, who's stringent, who's lenient, and in different cases and capital cases. With Sanhedrin, it goes through all of them.
Let me add something that I remember from Sota. With Sota, the witnesses don't need to give the warning. What happens is the husband gives the warning because they suspect that she might be cheating. So the husband gives the warning to the. Do you remember this? To the wife. That and they actually like sign a document or something. So, or it's a verbal warning. I can't remember, but it's one of the two. So she's actually given a warning in front with the husband, I think, in front of witnesses. And then if she goes and cheats, if anybody sees her cheating, doing adultery, then that's counted as valid. There's no need to give her a warning at that point in time.
On what Gavin's saying, it's a warning in order to make her drink the sota bitter waters with Hashem's name dissolved in water. And if she did commit adultery, she will internally explode. And if she didn't, she will give birth to a child, because only Hashem can remove that suspicion as to whether she or not she committed adultery. So it makes her susceptible to having to be forced to drink those waters unless she confesses. But it's not a warning in terms of viewing the act about to be committed. It's a warning about being in seclusion. So Gavin's right, but it's about the fact that the husband says, I'm warning you against this particular person that you cannot be in seclusion. It's not a general warning, specifically to what? He viewed, but he never viewed an act. He knew that she disappeared and he disappeared, and he said, I'm not happy. But it's to drink in order to drink the bitter waters, but not a warning to get executed. Hashem will determine if she's had the affair or not. Makes sense.
You must find out basically if it's the same thing with murder. If they suspect this person wanted to kill that person and he had a warning, then other witnesses completely removed happen to see the murder. Because the person had been murdered to stay away from him, is that the same
So Lance
case?
is correct. There's a point that we get to in chapter 2 called enmity. If a Jew hasn't spoken to his fellow Jew in 3 days and they've had a fight, it's noticed as if he's been forewarned that this person he's not on good terms with. And if the person accidentally dies, it ain't viewed as an accident. Lance is 100% correct. So the enmity creates a pre-existing warning. Lance, you're correct.
Okay.
All right, Kevin, if you guys don't have any more questions, we
I've
made
got one.
progress, but I don't think we wasted our time today going through this again. You guys are good. Are we going as
No,
fast
no.
as we can?
And the next parsha, the following is parsha, the sort that's in the upcoming parsha, the following week after Shavuot. So
Yes.
it discusses the sota in Parshat Bamid I think it's Parshat Naso in the book of Bamidbar. So it's coming up very shortly. Anyway, okay,
Kevin,
so
before you teach us, Brendan, did you have an urgent question?
I've got a question, but I'll post the voice note afterwards. It's something that might be irrelevant or relevant,
I
and it
just
might
want to
throw
hear
us
what
off a bit.
Kevin teaches us. Kev, go for it.
Yes.
okay, so right, this week we start the book of Bamidbar, which is Midbar actually means desert, and they were where the Jewish people were wandering in the desert before they entered the land of Israel. And one of the interesting discussions is that a census was taken, but not of the Levites were exempt from the census, the main census, and there were two censuses taken. And the first census, it was about 605,000, and the following census was 603,800, which is almost similar. So the question is, how can that be? It's almost impossible that the numbers are very, very similar. And the answer that is given is that there was stability in the birth rate and in the demographics of the people. I mean, that's all I have. So it seems strange, but anything is possible, and that the numbers hardly deviated dramatically. And so that's a question that is asked. And another thing is, every tribe had a banner, like a flag with their emblem. Each tribe had some were symbolized by animals or ship, etc. I don't remember. I don't know all of them, but each tribe had their own graphic on the flag or image, which was, and they were all located certain positions to around the Mishkan when the Mishkan traveled from place to place. Okay.
One question I don't understand. You know where Moshe counted each and every member of Klal Yisrael, and there were like 600,000 males. Okay, how's it possible?
And they lifted them. They physically
I'm
actually
saying the
lifted them and
Talmud
waved them.
The Talmud took.
Yeah, I know. But didn't he delegate? He did it personally himself.
Yes, I don't quite understand unless it was on super speed up mode.
Yeah.
I'm just asking. Boom, 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 boom. I don't understand.
And how do you count 600,000 in your mind? How do you
You just counted the
note
legs in the bottom
it?
too.
But how do you count? You can't even count 1,000.
Lance.
Can you count 1,000, Lance? And remember 1,288. How does someone even count? That's a miracle in itself. How you remembered
Yeah, but
the
you
actual.
actually, as you said, have to lift them. I don't know how his back handled it.
I've seen some of these Japanese students where they count with their fingers and they multiply and divide crazy numbers, and just
Oh,
with their
really?
fingers they do
Yeah, but Brendan,
amazing
here they
numbers.
had to do an acquisition of each person. It had to be a one by one count
With a coin, with a half
with
shekel
a half
coin.
shekel coin.
Um, Maybe they had a coin sorter. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
So
Lance, I need
with
to ask Rabbi Khan these
uh,
issues.
Not a
Anyway,
coin
listen,
of all
sota.
uh,
of
uh,
all of all the tribes, do we have knowledge of how their flags look like?
Yeah, it's in, but if you go to a shul, Brendan, some shuls
Yeah.
have like Benjamin, they have a symbol. In Israel, they do it. You
Sounds
see,
gone.
and one of them is a wolf, one of them is a ship. Some of them are, yeah, different images.
Yizachar
I
and
don't,
Zebulun
in
wanted
Israel,
it
you get them.
to